Hi, you guys. Welcome back to the Advice and Shit podcast. And welcome if you're new. If you're watching this over on YouTube, let me know what you're drinking down below in the comments. I'm drinking coffee today. And no, I'm not using that gross pumpkin spice creamer that I talked about last time because it was gross. Let me just not hold my mug by the handle and knock my microphone. That was a joy, wasn't it? But also, let's talk about the last podcast, because I was kind of about posting. I was kind of questioning, like, was I seeming too judgy on that episode? And the more I thought about it, the more, also, I don't know if you noticed, but I have a new camera. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, hopefully this just sounds better because I'm using a microphone again instead of the microphone in my, I almost call these earphones. Headphones? The heck was that? But yeah, the last podcast episode, I was kind of worried it was going to be coming across judgy. And then I realized that my last couple of episodes just seemed kind of judgy and not the point of the podcast, because I previously had a podcast where I was talking about the drama happening on the internet all the time. And yeah, I got a lot of clicks and I got a lot of views, but then I realized it just felt really toxic and I wasn't enjoying it. It wasn't fun for me. It was a lot of energy, a lot of negative energy. And that's why I wanted to do Advice and Shit podcast, where I could still talk about the drama of the internet, but at the same time, like, you know, talk about stories and things that were happening, things that were relatable, put a positive spin on it. And I realized lately I wasn't putting a positive spin on things, but at the same time, and like I knew this in my head, but at the same time I was telling myself that I was being over dramatic, and I was like gaslighting myself, like, no, it's fine. And it's this cycle that if I kept doing, where I would keep doing these things that were had like a negative energy associated with it, just things that didn't bring me joy, and I kept pushing myself and doing those things to the point where I just didn't do them at all anymore because I didn't find any joy in them. And I think that comes from, like I just said, like I was gaslighting myself into thinking that what I was feeling wasn't a big deal. And I think that plays a little bit into what we talked about last week, which is why I'm bringing up last week a little bit, and I kind of want to tie that into this week, because last week we talked about how overall teenagers with COVID, there was a increase in depression and anxiety, especially among teenage girls, but overall there was an increase. If you saw it on YouTube, you saw the graph, you looked at this paper, this journal article, which they have, scientific papers have to be peer reviewed by other scholars to be like, is this data real? You know, it's not like we talked about a little bit last time, where this professor did research about masks. He went through the peer reviewed process and published a paper. We talked about what type of masks were the best to fight against COVID, and gaiters were not it. So then people who worked with the gaiter company wrote a journal, like an article that you would find like a magazine, about how this guy was wrong. No peer-reviewed process, not really a valid scientific study. This guy just said, nope, don't believe it. And that was kind of it. And that's what sparked the whole, are masks even working sort of controversy thing. And so I think peer-reviewed scientific journals are a great way to go. And this peer-reviewed scientific journal we looked at last week talked about how there was an increase in depression and anxiety among teenagers, a larger spike among teenage girls because of COVID. Because of that isolation, you know. And if you look at how humans develop, you know, when they're, I think I talked about this a little bit last time, but like when they're before children are like 4 or 5 years old, they don't realize that they can lie. Like, that's why 2 and 3-year-olds are just really brutally honest, and they just say what they think. And sometimes it's a little rude and it's a little sassy, and that's because before that age, their brain hasn't developed enough to realize, oh, I don't always have to tell the truth. I can lie. That's like, back in the day, my mom was babysitting. This is way back in the day. But this is a thing that all people who grow up have to deal with. There was this like 3 or 4-year-old, so he was like right on the brink of realizing people can lie, right? And he was watching my mom read, in her head. And at this point, this kid didn't realize that you can think thoughts in your head and not say them out loud. So he thought my mom was pretending to read, and he was saying that she was a fibber, and he was like, you're just sitting there pretending to read, you're not actually reading. My mom was like, you can read, have the thoughts in your head, but you don't have to say them. Never occurred to him before, blew his mind. And so that's just some of the, like, your brain develops and you learn new things, you become aware of different things in your surroundings. So I say that because something that, hello Saomi, that was my cat. She's a Maine Coon. She's very fancy. We rescued her from a breeder. She's 7 years old. She's had 11 litters, which is a lot. So she's living the high life of retirement right now. We give her all the treats, and my vet says that's not good and she should be skinnier. But she worked hard, okay? She needs to live it up in retirement. Anyways, maybe if she comes up on the couch, you can see her. She's very pretty. She's very pretty. But anyways, so these teenagers, when you go through puberty, which also is why puberty is a vital thing for people, whether it's, you're a girl, you're starting to menstruate, which, I mean, now I look back and I'm like, ugh, gross, that was terrible. But I remember at the time, I was like, oh my god, like, when am I gonna get my first period? I want to get it before my friends. Like, it was a competition, like, we could decide, and it was like, who's gonna become a woman first? I remember that. I don't know if, you're a female and you did the same thing, but I remember all of our friend group was like, okay, who's gonna get their period first? Who's gonna be a real adult, a real woman first? And that's just a stupid thing, but also, like, guys get taller, they're more athletic, whatever. Puberty helps you physically develop into an adult, go into that phase, but also your brain develops mentally, and you're learning how, it's like your brain kind of like expands into noticing, oh crap, not just things about you as a person, but how you fit into the social environment around you. And it's crazy because that's why teenagers are so, like, self-conscious when they're going through this puberty stage, because they suddenly realize, oh my god, this is how I fit in to, like, my friend group, this is how I fit in at school, this is how I fit in to this environment that I'm in, and this is a new and scary thing to notice. And also, you have to question, do I like where I'm sitting in this environment? And you're also hyper aware of yourself, and you're trying to make sure that you fit in the way you want to fit in, and it's super stressful, right? And puberty is a terrible thing that we look back and we're like, ugh, terrible times, I hated it, but necessary things, right? It taught me, looking back, what real friendship is, because I didn't honestly have great friends. I was not anyone's first choice friend, which I should tell you right there, if you're getting, like, picked as, like, someone's 11th choice for a friend, you're not their actual friend. Let me just say, a little piece of advice, you're not their friend. But also just, I know puberty is like super awkward, there's a lot of hurt feelings and like, oh, I'm being left out, but learning how to deal with that hurt, I think, is so beneficial moving forward, because the thing is that there's going to be disappointments in life all the time. It's going to be hurt all the time, but you have to learn how to be able, as an adult, sit in that hurt, be okay with it, and validate yourself, which gets us into the topic of today's episode, which is learning to validate yourself. I think that was something that was so lacking for these kids that went through COVID, these teenagers that went through COVID, because they weren't going through the regular social experience that so many people have experienced before for generations, where you see how people treat you in person, right? These teenagers are isolated, having to interpret text messages. Boy, I could read a text the wrong way and panic. Like, I know we've all been there, where we've all been like, oh my god, what do they really mean by this? And you're overthinking it, and you're panicky, you're more anxious because you're not seeing a person's face and how they're actually acting about it and learning the social cues of that person. You're reading a text. That's difficult. That's hard, and that would make you more anxious and more depressed because you're more uncertain about where you stand in this social environment that you're in, because it's online and not in person, where you can't read social cues or whatever. And I think, now getting to the self-validating thing, I think this is kind of weird. The older generations, lots of parents were very hands-off, did not care or interact, which kind of sucks because, you want your kid to feel loved. But as a side effect of that, those kids, where their parents are more hands-off, as adults are better at validating themselves, because they had to validate themselves when they were a child, because their parent wasn't going to swoop in, save the day, tell them everything's going to be okay. They had to tell themselves that. I'll give you an example. I think my dad's a great example of this, because he does everything himself, and that's a problem. A bad side effect of that is not being willing to ask for help, because no one ever was there when you did ask for help, so you just don't want to ask, because in your head you tell yourself that the answer is going to be no. Okay, this is a fun story about my dad. Imagine a little 5-year-old, okay, and this is back in, my dad was born in 65, so he's 5, so this is 1970, when they're now making commercials like, don't play with fire and stuff. I remember that in like the 90s. They said like, don't play with matches and stuff. Well, they should have been putting those commercials out when my dad was a kid, because he burned down his entire backyard. There's a field in their backyard that led to like a field that was part of like some sort of company. Burned the whole thing down. Giant, massive fire. Burned off his eyebrows. The next day was picture day for kindergarten. Burned his eyebrows right off, whole field on fire. And my grandma was just like, well, you're not dead. Just like, you're not dead, and now we don't have to mow the yard because it's burned. Yeah, like or I think maybe he got in trouble because it was like, your eyebrows are burned off, or kindergarten. But there wasn't that like, oh my god, are you okay? Like, how did you feel about that? There was no, I guess, someone asking what your feelings were to validate your feelings. So it was very much sink or swim on validating yourself, I think, for that generation. And then I think for if like you're a millennial or maybe even Gen Z, I think I'm Gen Z, which is sad because, you know, the one thing I know about Gen Z is people ate Tide Pods, and that's so stupid. But there were definitely helicopter parents. I think helicopter parents definitely are an extreme, but I think in general, parents tried to be more hands-on and loving and caring and fixing things for their kids, because when they were a kid, they wished someone had been there for them, which is great. You want to be there for your kid. But because you went in, you swooped in, saved the day, so your kid didn't have to sit in this uncomfortable feeling that you went through as a kid. Now your kid never had to go through any uncomfortable feelings by themselves, so as an adult, when they face an uncomfortable feeling, they don't know what to do with that because they've never had to deal with that before. And so they kind of panic and freak out. I think that's why people are so terrible at self-validating. They go online, they're looking for likes and views and comments from people. They're looking externally instead of internally to validate themselves. And I'll give an example of myself. When I was in college, I'm in graduate school now, but when I was in college, I realized, I'm like, I don't think I want to be like a medical doctor. I love science, and I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor, but the closer I got to it, the more I realized I didn't want to do that. I wanted to teach, and I thought I wanted to teach high school students, and I told my parents that, and they were like, you could do more than that. And I was like, why won't you just... Basically, I wanted them to validate this and say, yeah, you can do that. Instead, they said, why don't you try for something more? And instead of me just validating myself and being like, okay, we can agree to disagree, because that's totally a fair thing. They're saying, my parents said, we'll support you in whatever you do, though we would rather you not do that. We want you to pursue something better. I didn't take that as I'm being supported, though it's not what they prefer. I took it as we actually don't support you unless you're doing this thing we want you to do. And so, because I wasn't validating myself and the choices that I wanted to make, and I was looking for them to approve of the choices I wanted to make, I was constantly kind of spiraling about what I wanted to do with my life, because I wanted someone to tell me that it was a good idea, that this was a good choice, this was a good path for me to follow. And because no one was telling me that, I felt like even though it was what I wanted to do, I couldn't do it. And if I just validated myself, I could have just done what I wanted to do and not need other people to tell me what to do. Other people's approval to do what I wanted to do. Now, if you're on YouTube, you'll see this. If you are on Spotify, you'll hear me talk about this. But we're going to talk about some self-validation. Okay. So, now if you're on your YouTube, you can see on the screen. External validation looks like you're looking for likes or comments about how your relationship is goals. I guess this picture is more about relationships. I don't know. Basically about how you're looking for likes or people to tell you that the thing you're doing is great. You know, it's a good choice. Whereas if you were validating yourself, you would see that this one's relationship oriented, that life with someone who supports the highest version of yourself. So if I was in a relationship with somebody and I looked for other people to say, oh, your relationship's so cute, it's goals or whatever, and that's how I knew my relationship was quote unquote good, that I should stay with that person, instead of being in a relationship with someone and knowing that they support me in my goals and the best version of myself. I'm not dating somebody who is, bringing out the worst version of myself or puts down the best version of myself. And I think if you look for external validation, instead of self-validation in relationships, like partners, you could very easily end up in an abusive relationship, because sometimes people are just so stupid. Like, they'll say, well, at least he, does this. Well, at least he opens the door for you, like, sure, he, like, degrades your hopes and dreams, but, like, were they even realistic in the first place? That whoever says that, they're not a friend, first off, okay? Secondly, you're not you're in your head, the fact that you're having that conversation with a friend where you're trying to say, is this a good person? Should I be dating them? Means that thought's already in your head. You already think this is not a good relationship, but you don't trust yourself and your own judgment of things because you haven't practiced self-validation. You don't trust yourself, that you're looking for other people to basically say the same thing as you. That's like people who, they ask you for advice and you give them advice, and then they're like, no, I don't like your advice. And then they go and ask the next person the same question. And you're like, why did you ask me if you didn't like, why did you ask me if you're going to pick and choose what answer you like, And they ask several people, like, oh, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Until they get the answer they want to hear. Because they know what the answer is to themselves, but they don't trust themselves and they haven't validated themselves enough to believe that their answer is good enough and they want someone else to say it too. Okay, another version of external validation is comparing yourself to others. So, social media is pretty terrible for this, like comparing, especially young girls, like body sizes, where you could compare like personalities. Like, there's people who fake personalities, like what's that girl's name? It's Whitney something. That girl who is on the internet and pretends to be black. She's like blackfishing. And she puts on these black stereotypes saying that she's black. Like, she is obviously looking for external validation. She's pretending to be someone that she's not to get validation, because obviously she doesn't think if she presented her true self she would get any external validation, and in no scenario is she validating herself. So, and that's not to give pity towards people who are blackfishing, because that's really fucked up. It's not to give pity, but maybe understanding, humanity back to it, I think. And the version of self-validation for that would be comparing yourself to the person you were yesterday. Like, I actually really, really like that, because, I think if we look at ourselves today, like who I am today, compare it to who I was, years ago, I could say, I've come leaps and bounds. Really, like, I never thought I would understand. I'm a PhD candidate for chemistry. Never did I think I would understand chemistry to this depth. Never did I think, that I would be in such a loving marriage, honestly. That's a good point to myself. I'm proud of myself for that. I think it would have been very easy for me to be in a toxic, maybe slightly like abusive relationship and thinking that was fine. That's when I look back at myself and the standards I held for myself before, and how I guess I look at my old self and how easily my old self could have been manipulated or put in a bad situation, just thought that was okay and that I would be, not that I deserved that, but that I didn't deserve any better. old me didn't think I deserved any better, or that I wasn't gonna get any better, because I wasn't worth anything more than that. And I look at where I am now, and I'm like, wow, I've come leaps and bounds, I think, in my own self-validation and self-worth, in knowing that I have a relationship. I'm in these friendships that are no longer toxic. I'm in a marriage that is not toxic or abusive. I'm surrounding myself with people that actually give a shit about me and are nice to me. And I look back and I'm like, damn, I didn't realize like how low self-worth old me had. But if I actually go through this like self-reflection, I'd realize this people I was putting myself around definitely weren't treating me like I had any self-value, which is a reflection of how much value I saw of myself. So I think validating yourself, definitely be comparing yourself to the person you were yesterday or in the past, like looking at, you know, who you were and realizing how far you've come. You know, maybe you were battling an eating disorder, or maybe you were battling depression, me over here, and realizing, wow, we made it this far. You know, I remember high school me, which high school and middle school me was very depressed. I think I've just in general been depressed, but I told my husband this, that like I think back and I didn't really picture myself in what I wanted to do super far past college. Like I didn't. Oh my gosh, Sayumi, can they see you? Can they see you? Here, show your face. This is Sayumi. She's my pretty kitty. Say hi. Say meow. She's not saying anything. Okay. Well, thank you for coming to set. Please don't bite any wires. That'd be very rude of you. I think you're gonna. Don't bite the wires. That's a bad kitty. Don't do that. Here. Show the camera your face. Look how pretty she is. Yeah. She's like, why is this light flashing in my eyeballs? Okay. Anyways. Okay. Sorry, I got excited. But let's move on to the next thing. So external validation would be telling your story is an attempt to have your struggle understood. You're looking for other people to understand your story in order to make your story valid. Like if other people understand what I'm going through, that'll make the story and the feelings I had in this event valid. Instead of just realizing that the fact that you had this human experience makes it valid, you know? Self-validation is healing yourself and using your story to inspire by example. You know? Like if you're sharing your story, it's not to get people to pity you or understand you or whatever. It's to inspire other people out of a similar situation. External validation is seeking approval and is sensitive to criticism. Me. If someone criticizes your feelings, like, it's like, no, you shouldn't be feeling that. You're like, oh, okay. I'm a sensitive bitch. I can't take it. All right. You know, I think, and everyone says that the generation is so sensitive. We're all so sensitive. And I think it's because we all, a little bit, seek approval and are sensitive to criticism because we're looking for external validation. We're not comfortable sitting in our own hurt and trying to figure out how to validate ourselves and deal with our feelings by ourselves. We need someone to tell us that the way we're feeling is valid and makes sense. When really, we should trust ourselves and realize this human experience I'm having is valid. And the way I'm feeling is valid. So, self-validation be you follow your intuition, how you really feel, and you seek fulfillment, something that is fulfilling to you. I think that's a big problem I have, is that I get kind of ambitious and I put my self-worth in my achievements in life. So I go and I go and I go and I go to the next achievement, go to the next achievement, go to the next achievement, and I never look for just what makes me feel fulfilled. Not like I'm a cup overflowing, working so hard to try and get all these achievements. I'm just a cup that's full, and I'm chill with that. I don't need to add anything else. And I get overwhelmed trying to get all these achievements because I'm working so hard to get all these achievements. I get overwhelmed. When instead, when I'm full, and my cup is full, stopping and being okay with that and just sitting in fulfillment. And the few times, I know I'm giving advice, but I'm also like trashing myself because I'm not good at that. But when I actually do that, the thing that I'm saying, which would be to sit in fulfillment, I do feel a lot better. And I'm not good at doing that, but the few times I have done that, I feel, just in general, so much better. Last thing of external validation would be emotional state depends on others. How you feel, the emotional state that you're in depends on what friend group you're in. Like if you have a friend group that's always, mad and angry all the time, you're always mad and you're angry, maybe because you're always gossiping when you're with them, that's not good. Your emotions shouldn't super change depending on who you're with. You're looking to their emotions and to how they're feeling to know how to feel in a situation, when instead your emotional state should depend on yourself. Like if you're in a happy mood that day, good for you. Your happy mood should stay happy the whole time, and not change by around who you're with unless like something happens, but it should stay pretty constant. Okay, now I'm going to pull up another picture that I thought was pretty good. It's how to go about validating yourself. I know I just talked about all these things. I know I just talked, sorry, someone was trying to call me and that was weird. I just talked about like all these things, like, oh, you should just validate yourself. How the fuck do I do that? Thanks for the advice. We're actually going to go through this cute little board thing that I found, which goes on to how to validate yourself. So, and I kind of like this a lot. So, we're going to go through and talk about it. Okay, so how to go about validating yourself. The first step is to treat yourself like a friend. I know. I don't think it's a new concept, but I think it's a new thing people are talking about more and more. Like, you need to treat yourself. Like, would you let someone, I get so much more irritated on other people's, like my friends' behalf when someone says something super rude to them. But if the same person would have said that to me, I would have been like, okay, well, that's fine. No, it's not. The anger that I'm feeling about myself, it's like I gaslighted. I'm like, no, don't be upset. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Nobody else around you seems upset about it, so it's fine. So don't be upset about it. It's fine. It's okay. And, when I get upset, and now that I have better friends, when something crappy happens, because we're all kind of bad at validating ourselves, someone does something really rude to them, our friend group will get mad at that person on our friend's behalf, and then our friend is like, yeah, that was fucked up that happened. It's like, oh yeah, I should stop gaslighting myself and telling myself it wasn't a big deal, because I can see from y'all's reaction that it was a big deal. And sometimes you have to be, if you have friends that'll do that for you, that's amazing, that's great. And it wasn't till I was in grad school that majority of my friends treated me like that. We had a friend group like that. I was usually doing that for everybody else, and no one was doing it for me. And I had some friends that did. And those friends, I was like, oh my god, they're amazing. They're like the light of my life. But a majority of my friends wouldn't do that. Now a majority of my friends do that, and it's very validating. And I wish I didn't need other people to validate myself and my feelings when something's irritating. Which is why we're doing these steps. So we don't have to rely on our friends for that. Though it is nice when your friends do that. If you don't have friends that do that, then you definitely need to do this. You need to treat yourself like a friend. Like, if your friend came up to you and said this happened to them, would you be upset on their behalf? And this says, as you navigate through the ups and downs of your relationships, remember to show love to the most important relationship you have in your life, your relationship with yourself. That's very true. I think we can easily have a terrible relationship with ourselves and think that that's fine. Like, people are like, oh, I don't really like myself. But that's fine. If you sit down and really think about that, and you think about how the types of relationships that you're with, the type of relationships you have with others, and how you let other people treat you is very much reflected in how much you actually like yourself. If you like yourself too much, you want all the people around you, the relationships you have, you're gonna have people that are kissing your ass all the time. If you're a humble person and you like yourself just the right amount, you'll have people who are good friends, treat you with respect, but if you're doing something stupid, they'll call you out and they'll tell you you're acting stupid, which is a type of friend you want to have, right? But if you don't like yourself at all, you'll let yourself have friends that treat you like crap because this friendship is treating you like crap. They view you as crap. You don't like yourself. You view yourself equal to crap. So you're in friendships where you're getting treated how you view yourself. And that's not to be self-blamey, like, of course you're in these terrible relationships is because it's your fault. No, people shouldn't be treating you that way, but you're letting people, just blow right over you because you don't care enough to be your own friend and not let people treat you like that. Because there's trolls and shitty people all over the world, and if they can find someone to push around, they definitely will. And that's just the way things are. So the second step to validating yourself is to show some kindness. Making someone's day can be as simple as opening the door for someone behind you, sharing a snack with a coworker who forgot lunch, letting someone go ahead of you in line, or smiling at a stranger. So simple acts of kindness, I think in part of the learning to validate yourself, learning to trust yourself, is realizing like every person starts off as a good person. They may just be going through something. Everyone's a good person who just may be going through something right now. So they're making not great decisions. So showing some kindness can be a way for you to validate yourself, like, no, I actually am a good person. And I deserve to be treated the way that I'm treating these other people, with kindness. The third step to validating yourself is to surround yourself with positive people. Abso-fucking-lutely. It's easier to stay focused on your end goal when you spend time with positive people. Not only will you feel better about yourself, but you will be energized and motivated. I think that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. I think that's also a two-parter for that. I think if you're around negative people all the time, or you're doing a podcast that's only about negative people and it's like bringing you down, like last couple of weeks on this last couple episodes on this podcast, it's not going to be positive for you. It's gonna bring you down and not put you in a great headspace in general, make your thoughts more cloudy because everything is so negative, right? Whereas if you're hanging out with positive people, it's like literally like a light in your life. It's like you feel better about yourself because there are these positive people, these good people wanting to spend time with you. And you'll feel energized and motivated because everything's positive. There's not a cloud looming over your head because all you do is hang out with people that are negative, right? And to play into that, I think it's better to hang out with positive people than to hang out with nobody. Because, I mean, if we look at the kids who went through COVID, everything was online. Everybody felt worse afterwards. Everybody felt more negative. Everybody felt more depressed and anxious. You know, without positive people around you, because it's kind of like a community, everybody's bringing each other up because everyone's being positive. If you don't have that, I think it's so much easier to kind of spiral in your own mind and dig yourself deeper in negative thoughts if you're not going out having a positive conversation with positive people. So I think, it's better to be with positive people than to be by yourself. Now there's times to be by yourself to re-energize and stuff, but being around positive people in general is a good thing. Practice self-care. In order to feel good, self-care goes beyond simply relaxing, okay? It includes looking after your physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual self. Sorry, I had a hiccup or something. My therapist calls it the pies: your physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. You need to do something for your pies, one thing for your pies every day in order to, I think, have positive thoughts so that you can be that positive person for somebody else, to not be negative. And I don't know, to validate yourself and feel that fulfillment we were talking about earlier. It really does help. So, more than just relaxing or dissociating on your phone, just scrolling for days, what is that doing for you physically or intellectually or emotionally or spiritually? Nothing. So physically, maybe you want to go on a walk, ride a bike, do a little exercise every day. Intellectually, try and learn a new language, read a book, maybe. It again kind of ties into last week's episode about spending less time on the internet. Emotionally, I think maybe journaling your emotions. And this is something that I also got from my therapist, because I think I focus so much in on the negative. It's like you can have 100 comments, 99 of them are positive, one's negative. You're going to hold on to the negative one, the one negative comment, and focus in on that so much more than you will to the 99 positive ones, because negativity has so much more of an impact on you and sticks with you so much easier than positivity does. So I think journaling, an emotional thing for self-care would be journaling how you're feeling, but not journaling negative emotions, because I think that'll spiral and that would build up, because I was doing that and I realized it wasn't helping because I was just feeling more depressed. I think journaling positive emotions you have, so that it's actually you have to reflect and remember, this positive thing happened today, and they're taking the time to actually write about the positive thing that happened that day, the positive emotions you had. If you set a boundary with someone and you stuck by that boundary, write that shit down, because you did something for yourself that day. You stuck to a boundary. It's a positive emotion that you did. And spiritually, if you want to meditate, listen to some gospel music. Do whatever you're doing spiritually. Me, I love listening to Christian music. It makes me feel uplifted. Not the old-timey hymn stuff though. Like, my genre of Christian music is for me. It really makes me feel overwhelmingly better. Like, a real spiritual connection is how I feel with it. Like a real cleanse. But you can do whatever for you. That's just what I do emotionally. And then celebrate achievements. Like, if you set that boundary, bitch, and you stand by it, good for you. If you set a boundary recently and you're watching this on YouTube, comment below that you set a boundary for yourself, and we'll all give you a round of applause, because good for you. Good for you. That shit's hard, because you said it, and then people try to like test you on it, and you're like, now I gotta stick by what I said. Shit. It's a little bit difficult. So celebrate your achievements. When you acknowledge your accomplishments and celebrate even the smallest of them, you will gain a sense of self-confidence and motivation to succeed. Like me, I'm really bad about relaxing and taking a break. And so yesterday I did have my Chinese class, and then I went and I listened to a podcast to do all the dishes, and then I was like, and we're gonna relax. And I relaxed for like an hour, and I was like, and to reward ourselves for actually relaxing and not working so much. Like, and you may think, oh, you really have a problem with relaxing? Yes, bitch, I do. I don't know how to relax. I really don't. I figured out my version of relaxing is sitting and watching 2020 or a murder show. Or Forensic Files. That is my version of calm. That's my version of relaxed. I don't know how to relax and not overwork myself, to the point that a couple weeks ago I was so depressed because I realized I was at a breaking point and I needed to relax. I didn't know how to relax, and I had worked myself into so much stress that I literally gave myself back pain. I wasn't doing any of my pies. My therapist asked me, she's like, what are you doing for your pies? Your physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. And I'm like, literally nothing. I haven't done anything for any of my pies. I forgot about my pie. And like, I had like a breakdown on the floor under a weighted blanket, because I was like, the weight of the world is just so much. All the stress I'm feeling is just so much. It's like I needed an external validation. I'm like, I'm gonna put this weighted blanket on me as like some sort of external validation, because I feel like the weight of the world and the weight of all this stress is just bringing me down. So I need an actual physical weight on top of me to validate how I'm feeling, because again, not good at self-validation, so I had to do something external to validate myself. And then I started doing more pies, and I actually felt better. So, oh yeah, what was it? I celebrated an achievement yesterday. I sat and relaxed for an hour watching 2020, because I have a problem, and murder shows are relaxing. I don't know why. Really don't know why. And I went and ate a bowl of ice cream. I've been really self-aware of my health lately and eating a lot of vegetables. So that was another thing. I was like, you know what? We've been eating a lot of just plant-based foods for most of our meals lately. Let's fuck up that whole trend and celebrate ourselves and eat some ice cream. Some birthday cake ice cream. Because it's been in our freezer. We haven't eaten any of it because we were wanting to, I don't know, be healthy or something. But, yeah. And that is the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and this was a more fulfilling episode for you, as it was more fulfilling for me, talking about my own experiences and going through and actually giving real advice instead of talking shit about things on the internet. You know, talking shit about myself, but in a fun way. And so hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know if you're on YouTube. Comments down below, like this video, subscribe to this channel. If you're on Spotify, thank you for listening. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you in the next podcast episode. Okay, bye.